This portion of the Platforum is brought to you by Roumettes, the fastest way to bring the illusion of 3D detail to the insides of your model railroad structures. And by ITLA Scale Models, where the city meets the railway, providing unique and configurable laser-cut structure kits to the modeling community.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Platform, the podcast for the rail fan and the model railroader alike. We are coming to you from the North Shore of Lake Ontario, somewhere between Toronto and Montreal on a very busy rail corridor, hosting 40 to 50 trains a day. In addition to our 3 studio cameras, we also have a Railstream webcam that we can tap into and make use of that's attached to our station here that can bring us the footage from the trains going by, should some arrive, and also our favorite grade crossing. And if we're lucky, we might get an oil pan scrape. With me today on the platform is somebody that I have known for 2 or 3 years now through the interwebs, but I'm actually getting a chance to sit down and talk to in person today, Mr. Eric Gagnon. Eric, welcome to the platform.
Thanks, Bob. Great to be
now,
here.
before we get into your book and we talk about your blog, what's up with this Fallowfield effect thing? Because you're causing me grief, man. What's going on?
Well, it's a style of modeling and also photography that is eye level, highly prototypical, often imitated, seldom duplicated.
That's probably a good thing. I've appreciated it, and I've appreciated your good-natured, your presence online in the Facebook groups that you and I frequent is welcomed.
Well, I think take your job seriously, but don't take yourself seriously is the watchword on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I hope that's part of the Fallowfield effect too.
It definitely is.
Yeah. We have a passion for what we do,
Yes.
but we don't take ourselves or the hobby so seriously that it impacts our joy.
Well, it's supposed to be a release from stressful things in life, so let's keep it that way.
Absolutely. So I'll raise an eggnog to you.
Cheers to you.
Okay, this is straight eggnog that we're drinking, of course, laboratory tested.
Yep.
We got to stay. We should have probably warm cider would have been more appropriate for today, but eggnog.
We'll just go with it.
Yeah. Eric, before we get started, I just want to show our audience. I referenced your books. You've done 4 VIA books.
That's correct.
What was the inspiration for the books?
I can't remember anything, so if there's any chance of remembering it, the best way is to put it in print. So I use those to remind myself and also remind other people, because online, where we live sometimes, we tend to get a lot of arguments started and not settled, friendly arguments. But when you have everything recorded, and a lot of it comes down to numbers or photos, to have it in a central place that you can refer to, that's part of the reason I did that. Because
it's a handy reference.
Yeah, nobody can remember all the trivia, or trivia as I like to call it, because there's a ton of it, even over 40 years. There's a lot of little details we forget about. And another thing I found was a lot of people say, I remember seeing that one time. Well, when was it? Did it happen the way you remembered it?
Yeah.
And this was my attempt to try and crystallize a lot of that into a written form.
The mind can be a tricky witness sometimes.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So it's not just a picture book. There's also roster information. I was leafing through it, and I've got to get myself a set of those. We'll make that happen.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything, but I think the title of that one, Across Canada Compendium, really means a collection of information from various sources, not all my own, but certainly nothing corporately from VIA either. So it's nothing you would necessarily find all in one place anywhere else.
Yeah. So it's really the musings of a trackside rail fan.
Someone who's been trackside throughout VIA's life.
Yeah.
And continues to be. Yeah.
I want to talk to you about your blog, Trackside Treasure.
11 years.
11 years. You're very prolific with the blog. I've been happy to contribute to it. I think there was a time when I was on location somewhere, and I was able to provide a quick photo for you. I think it was at Woodstock.
Yes, and I did a whole post on the Fallowfield effect if people want to read about it, so it's on there.
Well, there's better things to read on your blog than that. Talk to me about the inspiration for the blog, the genesis of the thing, square one, back to the drawing board. How did Trackside Treasure begin? I'm sure it began with a thought.
It started with 2 things, a bathroom and a women's magazine. You're going to say, what is the connection? Well, we all have rooms.
I'm afraid to ask.
I'm going to tell you. We all have rooms where we do our best thinking. And so I picked up one of my wife's magazines and I said, here's an article about blogging. I've heard about blogging. I've heard about the blogosphere. but what's it about? And the article is something like 10 ways to make money at blogging. And I thought, oh, it can be a money maker for you. Then I found out two things. To make money, you have to have ads, and you have to have 186,000 views per week, neither of which I was going to do. But at that point, I was stuck because I wanted to put a lot of my photos and my information in some sort of non-paper but semi-permanent format. So that's what actually was the genesis of it, but that didn't last too long. But yeah, so since 2008, I've posted weekly, generally. So you get 4 to 5 posts a month, which some would say is a bit underachieving, but it's attainable for me.
Yeah.
And to give each post a bit of context, a bit of history, and my involvement as well.
Yeah. I don't think that those numbers warrant the descriptor of underachieving. I would say that's fairly prolific. Although the internet crowd does suffer from very short attention span.
And some bloggers blog multiple times a day.
Yeah,
which that's not my thing. So.
I know a guy who posts a lot of his stuff on Facebook. That guy's got a problem.
Well, thank goodness he changes it up and he's got good content, which I think is the hallmark of blogging.
I think I hear our second guest arriving.
I think it's Avia. Beautiful.
Eric, tell me, are you just as annoyed as I am that we have to try and do a show next to a railway line?
Well, I think you could do it worse places, but it's never a dull moment here. We've had a pretty good run of trains.
It's been a pretty good parade.
Yeah.
40 to 50 a day, and that's a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a ton.
Yeah. So you had the idea of the blog. Tell me where the name came from.
Well, I came up with 5 names initially, and the one was back to the underachieving idea, slack action, which I thought was a nice oxymoron.
Slacker in action.
Slack, how does that work? But anyway, I like alliteration, so I thought TNT, something that repetitive is sticks in the brain a little bit. And I do think that when we are trackside, we got to find the treasure, whether it's on the track, beside the track, around the track, and if we find it, we like to keep it, preserve it, and share it.
Do you remember your very first blog post? I apologize, I'm putting you on the spot. Do you have a guess?
It was something about my little corner of cyberspace. Why is Eric doing this? It was something like that. But we quickly launched into what I thought was going to be quite a series of retro railfan reports, again, alliterative, but endless consists online of various trains and various cars hooked together. I thought was going to probably run its course. So that actually what went into my first book was all those consists. But then I started looking at other things and other websites, and some people want to do a whole historical approach to everything. Here's the history of everything in the railfan world. Here's the history of that train, that location. And I find that's a bit of a trap because you get locked into something and you have to be the authority on it and the source. So I want to balance some historic things with some modern things. I want to balance my CN with my CP, which not everybody can do. Sometimes people just do a lot of CP, and sometimes that works into the Fallowfield effect. I think you know about that. I want to do a little freight.
The action red runs deep, my friend.
Absolutely. The Pac-Man versus the Multimark.
Yeah.
I want to do CN versus CP steam, diesel, but it's almost always Canadian. Yeah. And that was another big thing for me, to have Canadian content.
Yes, you want it to be current, you want it to be Canadian, and you want it to be wide in its
interesting
its
to many folks, but I'll tell you one thing, whether it's the books or the blog, it's things that self-indulgently interest me. So it's something I'm interested in. The odd time I've tried to write on the blog, let's say, about something that I'm not particularly interested in, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel authentic. And so I try to do what interests me. Then, hopefully, it'll interest someone else, and someone else, and someone else, and so on. But that's the way it starts out. So if 1 or 2 or 3 people are looking at that same thing and interested in it, I feel I've done my job.
You may have started the blog 11 years ago, but your passion and your journey in rail fanning started from a young age, didn't it? Tell me about your family heritage in terms of the hobby of rail fanning and model railroading. Tell me about inspirations and about that.
Yeah, it seems to have started with my dad. And let's face it, he was from an era where the train was Railways were very much more a part of daily life and society. He worked for a short time for the Canadian Pacific. He lived in Montreal. And
In what capacity?
He worked in the freight receipts office and another job or two in Windsor Station, downtown Montreal. So he would ride the CPR in from Westmount down to Montreal.
Very neat.
So, recently I came across some letters that he and my mother, his wife, were exchanging, and some of them were like, "I'm writing this to you on the train." So it really was woven into daily life at that point. So he has the railway bug, and then us kids, to various degrees, picked it up more and more from him. And so my brother also has a blog. It's called Rolly Martin Country. And he does a lot more from a current but also historic standpoint.
Whose blog's older?
Well, tough call. I think
Is there some friendly competition there?
Well, no, we sort of feed off each other, but he started on a couple different platforms, but I've been on the Blogger platform the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And his was more of a website at the
Yeah,
beginning?
he started as a website. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it feel weird at your station in life, and I'm not calling you an old guy, I'm an old guy.
I'm older.
Does it feel weird at your station of life to refer to yourself as a blogger? Because that's sort of a millennial, sort of younger term.
Yeah, well, like Canadian Railways lasted longer at certain things like cabooses and, different technologies than American Railways did. I feel like I'm a late adopter to a lot of technology, be it Facebook, blogging, and that's okay because I think it's there to make use of it in any way you can that resonates with you. So I don't think I'm like a 6-time-a-day blogger. I'm like a once-a-week blogger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very underachieving.
Yeah, I feel that, but I'm also ploddingly loyal to the cause, so I keep doing it, and I've got probably 34 posts in draft form right now.
What has been the biggest development? How have you developed in the biggest way by starting this blog? There's, 2008, I guess, would mean when you started. There's 2008 Eric, and there's 2019 Eric. 11 years of doing this blog. How have you developed, and in what way would you say you've developed the most?
Yeah, not to be, again, self-indulgent, but 2008 Eric would not be sitting here with Bob Fallowfield. 2008 Eric was sitting at his dining room table, blogging. To make these kind of connections, and I think a lot of people don't think of that sort of thing.
So networking,
making connections with like-minded people through my books, I've learned so much. And while we're not always face-to-face, like you and I didn't start out that way, it's nice to be that way today. But to make those sort of connections, learn from each other, share with each other, I think has been a huge benefit to 2019 Eric.
Would you agree with this statement? The very best part of this hobby is the people.
A lot of people say that, and I do agree with that. I think a lot of importance should be given to the history and sort of what we're doing, but definitely the environment you're doing it in and who you're doing it with definitely adds to the enjoyment of it.
Yeah. Being in the internet space with your hobby is a lot like working in a job that involves the public.
Yeah.
They always say, like in retail, you either love the public or you hate the public. And I know hate's a strong word, but for the sake of the binary, it's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
And when you work in the internet space, you really do develop a thick skin, or at least you have to. Not that anything that you're posting or creating is highly controversial, but did you know that on the internet there are self-proclaimed railway experts?
Yes. And
is that a newsflash? News at 11?
They make themselves known occasionally. But even there, I think it's important to collaborate with people, meet them where they are. And some of the self-proclaimed experts actually want to learn more. They're not really 100% experts in every sense of the word, but you can help them and work with them as well.
I hear our second guest.
I do too. Maybe that same.
Double stacks.
Double stacks. We got to find the interest in those where we can.
Yeah.
But I did a whole post on the blog called Ode to a Double Stack, because I was a few miles east of here and I just saw this thing going past and I thought, are we going to turn away from it and not give it its due level of interest? No.
Yeah.
We'll make a little haiku about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I once heard modern railroading described as stacks, macks, and racks.
Yeah. Well, we're not going back to the boxcar days and stock cars full of cattle. We may as well admit to that.
Yeah.
But this is what pays the bills.
That's what pays the bills.
You know, that's what pays people's pensions is what's in those boxes. So, yeah.
I'll say something controversial.
Do it.
Because I love getting hate mail on the platform. You very rarely see intermodal modeling done well.
Yes.
That's not a play on well car either.
Yeah, I get you.
What I mean by that is there are a lot of people who are fans of intermodal modeling, but for them it ends with shiny plastic well cars and glossy plastic containers in the cars.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you actually see weathered, highly detailed, high fidelity intermodal modeling.
Yeah, well,
it's out there. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I mean it's a rare day when you find those photos.
Well, none of these is clean.
That's right.
They're rusty.
Oh yeah.
And my friend and fellow blogger Chris Mears down in Nova Scotia would look at the snow. Look at the snow on the back of those boxes. Like, I'm not saying the model's snow, but that's not just a box anymore. You know, that's out in the weather.
Yeah.
And,
not only are the cars weathered, but I mean the containers have a story to tell in their own right.
Yes. And we could talk about graffiti, but that's really going to get us hate mail. It's a love-hate thing.
That portion of the hate mail will direct to your your mailbox.
Yeah.
Listen, you know what? I'll make a statement about graffiti. I don't mind taking it on the chin.
Mm-hmm.
Models, if a model is simply a miniature representative of what you see, then what you see needs to be in the miniature.
Yep.
Just because you have a well car that's tagged with graffiti does not mean that you are endorsing it in any way. You are simply an artist that is painting a picture of what you see. And if you see graffiti, it's on the model.
It's there. And a lot of modelers want to have an intermodal facility. What we sometimes forget is we're challenged in this dimension on a model railway. We don't have 3 miles of space to put that in that it deserves. We have about 400 feet. And how can you squeeze that in 400 feet?
I never thought I would say this, and it might be the eggnog talking, but I'm actually really starting to have an appreciation for intermodal trains.
Yeah, well, it's the future. And the last issue of Trains magazine bemoaned the loss of loose car railroading. Yeah. And I think CN is one of the railways to have that still.
Yeah.
But gets back to talking about things on Trackside Treasure. And, you know, I'm given sometimes to sort of being countercultural, especially in the model railway world, because I don't go along with a lot of what people are modeling. And I want a space where, online space, where there's no editor, there's nobody poking, well, they can poke holes all they want, but I have access to that, to a certain number of people that might read that, to say what I like. And, you know, if I want to be the only guy in Canada who's put X2F couplers on a Rapido train's locomotive, I'm that guy. And I can profile that on the blog, and I find that very freeing.
Yeah.
You know, so back in the days, we used to report things that we saw trackside through newsletters, and there was an editor. And we always had to sort of get past the editor as the gatekeeper. And that's what I like about blogging, is that is totally removed and is de-stratified. And, you know, you have access. Sure, everyone else has access too. And I have a lot of people in Russia that are interested in renting cars that are trying to put comments on my blog, but I can go in and delete them, you know. So you want public engagement, but sometimes you want to control it a certain amount too. But when you get that people from thousands of miles away commenting on your blog, it is those relationships, though from a distance, that you're making and connections that you're making. This looks like CN number 149 out of the Port of Montreal, and that's a dirty long train every day. And we're meeting Via here.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah.
A double, this is what we call a platform twofer.
It's a twofer.
It's a twofer.
This is why we're here, not in some sterile studio somewhere. Roughing it in the bush.
Listen, if I have to wear the winter woolies and a couple layers of insulation to be able to do this,
we'll do it.
I'll gladly do it.
We'll do it.
Eric, looking back over 11 years of having the blog, is there a blog post that comes to mind that perhaps would be maybe the most rewarding for you, or maybe garnered the most attention or feedback? Is there one that kind of rises to the top?
What I really like sometimes when I have the time and the energy is to try and delve into some little known factoid out there that nobody seems to be able to answer. I have a short attention span, but I do like to go down the rabbit hole sometimes. The one that was interesting was the tiny lettering on the Scenoramics. So these are via...
On the which, sorry?
Scenoramics.
Scenoramics.
Via dome cars that ran till the early 80s. They were secondhand through CN from the Milwaukee Road. And they had a particularly very small little set of stenciling up in the top corner. Nobody knew what it meant. Via what I call via files, even like the Schron and his Schronians, I call them, couldn't find that information. But if you delve deep enough into some of the U.S. Regulatory paperwork on that, you can find the original trust agreement that Milwaukee Road entered into, and that was on there. So that was a lot of interest for me, and some of those VIA fans who hadn't actually found that were happy to find it. But other than that, I did one called Trackside with my dad, which was about all things train related with my dad. So even modeling, being trackside with my kids like he was, his influences, and that garnered a lot of comments from people. And I actually extended it to 2 posts. So that goes back to that what we were talking about earlier about the connections. That's what people I think are interested in. You can talk facts, figures, numbers all day, and it's like, to some people, ho-hum. As one person said about one of my books, it's just a book full of numbers, you know. The next feedback I got on that book was from a young person in Toronto who sent me a postcard, basically said, this is the best book I've ever read. So within 24 hours, you get that spectrum of feedback from people. But I think if you're going to ask for feedback, you have to take the feedback. As you found out, you know,
Good
a lot
and
of
bad.
people want to say, hey, Bob, where's your track plan?
Yeah.
You know, and you've got to say...
It's in the mail.
It's the check.
With the check.
Like, you know, you can't just say, you know.
I brought a signed copy of it for you today.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I'll frame it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be a small frame.
I
Be
imagine
about the size of a coffee shop napkin.
virtual.
Yeah, I should have kept that thing.
Yeah, so there are some posts, but I don't do a lot of like page views and comments. It goes back to the part about being self-indulgent. I'm really not interested in who's reading it. Why? Because I can't tell.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with the internet. This is international. It's transcontinental. There's people reading this all over, and they find it through Google or Google Images, or I don't know how they find it, but I know that it's something that you don't know who's looking at it. So it's like a book when you sell it to someone. Someone sometimes sends it to someone else, and now someone else is reading it, and you don't know where that ends up. And I think that's fascinating because, especially with a blog, clearly I'm not making money at it, but it's putting things out there into cyberspace that people can learn from. Hopefully learn something about that they didn't know about.
Have you ever given any consideration to your blog being your legacy?
Nobody lives forever, and nothing online lives forever. I guess I go to mirror sites sometimes, but the blogging platform that it's on could come along tomorrow, like some of the earlier groups that we were talking about that we're on that disappear. They morph into something else. MySpace, things like that are no longer, and listservs that we used to circulate the information on are no longer around. So similarly, I know that someday this blog or platform will disappear, and perhaps all these posts will disappear. So what?
That would be a shame because it's content rich.
Yeah, what's the alternative? Is to print it all off and put it in a book and I've had that request from people.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Why don't you put this into a book? I said, do you want a book that's, 8 by 11 and 3 feet tall? Because that's what that book would look like. Because I printed a few posts out.
Don't offer free shipping on that baby.
No free shipping. There'd be no Cyber Monday special on that one.
Cyber Monday special.
So a lot of it is the sort of the temporal nature of it, and just put it out there.
Yeah, so you don't really consider it as a legacy or leaving your thumbprint on the community?
No, I don't. It's for the moment.
Yeah.
It's for the moment, and whatever lives on, but,
Do you find that your inspiration for different blog posts come from the craziest of sources sometimes?
Yes. I started out with, what did I know? What did I do? That gets kind of old after a while for people. So what else is going on? What are some of the trends? What are things that people are interested in? That sort of thing. Bringing those in, and not just, a lot of people will contact me and say, hey, why don't you do a blog post on this? And that's really tough because as much as I want to please that person and give them something they're interested in, I don't have the resources to do that. I may not have that information. I may not have experienced that. So any of us could go and look up that information somewhere, but for me to do it for something that doesn't really get me going is tough. And that's always a tough email to get, or a tough message.
Is there a piece of historical information as it pertains to your blog and to railways that you're still chasing? Is there still a rabbit hole that...
Yeah, I don't think I know. I don't think I've gone down them yet.
You haven't.
And I don't think I know they're there yet.
So you don't know what it is you don't know.
Exactly.
There's an excitement to that.
Absolutely, and that's what keeps me coming back.
Yeah.
And wanting to do more. The other thing is, are there a lot of other such blogs out there? I don't know. There's a few, like Steve Boyko. I had the opportunity to meet him in June in Winnipeg. He has an excellent blog, Confessions of a Train Geek, and he's a very prolific blogger. But he came into rail fanning a little later than I did, you know, and he's been in different parts of Canada than I've lived in. So he looks at it from a different viewpoint. And a lot of what we're seeing online today is very quick and then it's gone. It's on Facebook, we'll try and find it.
Yeah.
You know, I can easily go into the search box on my blog or some other blogs, and you can look for that actual post and you can find it. So I think it's a market that hasn't been explored. And what I always hate to see on a blog is the following statement in a post: well, I haven't blogged anything for a while. And when I see that, I think that's kind of sad. You know, if I want to do something, I want to keep it going. I don't want to just flame out after 6 months. I you know, it's like that sign on school buses: makes frequent stops. Some people make frequent starts.
Yeah.
You know, and I find that a little bit
And you do
off-putting.
stop at all railway crossings.
I do, and I slow the hell down, and I hope something's coming. Quite often it's
What's
not.
the feedback been like? Just over 11 years. I mean, do you get any hate mail?
No.
No. I wouldn't think so.
I don't think
but
so.
I thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the only guy.
Yeah, just from you. No. But the effect. No, I don't think so. Frankly, I don't think people want
Did you get the skywriting message that I sent? I hired out a plane to stop with the fallow field.
Yeah, and then the flying monkeys came in. And I thought, oh, this is just like the Wizard of Oz. What's happening? No.
So it's been abundantly positive.
I would say so. I, as an optimistic person, I tend to tune out the negative. So
Yeah,
maybe
you
there
have to.
was some, and whatever. You know, I honestly don't think people are going to take the time to comment negatively. Because they know it can be deleted anyway. So, you know, but I think online, social media, people do that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, because it does have a zinger effect.
Yeah.
So the blog is a little bit more separated time-wise. It's not as immediate. So
I want to shift gears, just close with a couple of questions about your model railroading, the model railroading side of Eric. I think it's a public record that you live in Kingston, Ontario.
that's correct.
We'll give out your street address and your home phone number in the B-roll on
Photo
top of the
my
screen.
house. Yeah.
Tell me, give me the Coles notes on what it is you're modeling, what it is, where it is, and why you're uniquely interested in it.
Right. Well, right now, I've sort of brought my modeling home to Kingston. So I'm modeling what I call the Hanley Spur, which is the CN and CP waterfront trackage in Kingston in about 1970.
Okay.
By way of Vermont, Vancouver, and Winnipeg were all my previous HO model locales that I did. So I've actually brought it home to a part of town I never really got over to, which is kind of surprising, but I'm trying to play catch up with that a little bit. So interestingly, our club in Kingston has sort of picked up on that, and we're looking into a portable layout based on that same Hanley Spur, because a lot of us say, hey, this is Kingston history, we could preserve this in model form.
Does the Hanley Spur exist today?
No.
It's long gone.
No, and in fact, the outer station in Kingston is just pretty much rubble now, where it used to begin, so.
I hear our second guest,
I do
Eric.
too. Sounds like freight action. I think it's the same guy that's been switching for a while.
He's doing a loop.
Yeah. He's gone all the way around the loop and come back. And he was there when I came in 10 o'clock this morning. He was still there, so he's been there all day. So, so I think what we have to be careful of in model railroading is not modeling someone else's layout.
Yeah.
A name that comes to mind is Lance Mindheim. Very prolific guy, has had various layouts, just like I have various model locales, but a lot of people want to model his modeling. And I sometimes wonder if I'm doing that with your layout. Am I trying to make this more of the fallow field effect in Kingston? The reason I say that is because it's weird. This is the most scenic layout I've had. My other layouts, there was large stretches of plywood. And when you bring that camera down to low level, you see that plywood and you go, that looks like crap. You know, I got to scenic that a bit more. Now, unlike you, I've totally disposed with any kind of ballast or any kind of proper track work or any kind of level of detail.
Drainage, Eric.
0 for 3 on my layout. It's tabletop flat. It's a 4x8 of plywood cut into.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Are you having fun with it?
I'm having a ton of fun, and the trains are rolling.
Yeah.
And the trains roll after about a month of that prototype starting.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm all about.
I think that when I look at what you're doing in your base, I presume it's in your basement.
Yes.
When I look what you're doing in your modeling space with your lack of ballast and your X2F coupler,
absolutely.
I'm going to say this, and it's being filmed, that you're a good yin for my yang.
Yeah.
Because I look at what you're doing, and I see a guy that's not necessarily being anti-establishment, although there might be a little bit of that.
Could be perceived.
I think that I see a guy that's keeping it simple.
Yeah.
And I think it's a guy that's, they always say the number one rule of model railroading is, it's my railroad, my rules.
Yes, yeah.
It's a very pretentious thing to say.
Yeah.
My number one, Bob Fallowfield's number one rule.
Slack action would have been a great name for a blog.
That's our censor guy. So we don't have a bleeper guy. We just have slack action.
Yeah,
that crashes.
slack action.
Bob Fallowfield's number one rule of model railroading, and really anything in life, is have fun and have a blast doing it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get so caught up with the hyper prototype stuff, the minutia of the thing, that we just stop and forget to have fun.
Yeah. And I think you and I overlap a certain amount. Like, I don't think we're polar opposites by any means. I think we share some of the same area, but I've always been, as you are, very interested in operations. So I know there's people that have a huge layout, and there's the article in the Model Railroad Press about it. And there's a paragraph near the end called operations, and it's about that long.
3 lines.
I hope to have an operating session soon, and I thought I could never do that. And I go back to those early articles posted or published in Model Railroad about Frank Ellison. I guess they're actually reprints, sort of rehashed material, because his time was probably 30 years before that. But he talked about a system where you could actually operate the layout and not have a lot of this early model railroading. It was like from the mine to the refinery to the mine, then from the slaughterhouse, to the warehouse and to whatever. Like, he talked about a more sort of holistic and more interesting way to actually move those cars in a prototype manner, and I really got hooked on that. And so all of my layouts, there's some operating scheme to it. It's not just, hey, let's run an eastbound. To where? Why are we doing this? You know? So there is a purpose to it.
Well, I think it's really refreshing, and I think that it's great that you're sharing what you're doing, and I'm going to say warts and all.
Yeah,
we all have warts.
There's warts.
Well, I've got warts. Boy, do I have warts.
We could edit that out.
Warts and all. But I think there is space for that because, again, I think the good life is the balanced life. And it doesn't matter whether it's spending time writing a blog post or it's time in a train room. I think the good life is the balanced life. Eric, I want to thank you very much for joining me today. This has been so much fun. And I have to tell you that I really wish that there was more of this in our hobby. We know names and personalities online, but it is a completely different thing to actually share a platform. And to actually sit and have an eggnog with you has been terrific. So cheers to you, my friend.
Thanks for inviting me.
And I guess we'll see you online.
We'll see you online.
Be sure to check out Eric's Hanley Spur info. Be sure to check out his blog and get in touch with him and buy his books. I'm going to talk to him about getting a copy of each of them myself right after this. If you want to find out more about us on the platform, you can check us out on the YouTube at the Platforum. Also, be sure to check out our new audio only called the Platforum Station House Audio Series, which streams on Spotify. I'm Bob Fallowfield. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on the Platform. Let's go watch trains.
Let's do it.